Could you roll back the 5 forces slide for a second? Who are their competitors?
Dow, Hinkle, Procter & Gamble, as code.
Yeah, you showed the slide, didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay. How important are economies of scale in the surfactant industry?
Not very important. It's a pretty, surfactants are a pretty, it doesn't matter where you get them from, it's essentially the same thing. It's not diversifiable, or it doesn't really matter that much. And Stepan is the leader in this particular industry. So
Okay, they're not differentiated. How important are economies of scale? Or is it cheaper to make a whole bunch of them than a few?
I would assume so. Stepan, all the other companies that are up here, they have a more diversified product line. Stepan is the major producer of surfactants. So like I think it was Asco Noble or the BASF. They focus more on like stuff for airplanes and stuff like that. So like the surfactants is like a small portion of their business. But Stepan is more like the specialized in surfactants and polymers. So they're the ones who receive the most business for the surfactant market.
even though Stepan is so much smaller than these other countries, they dominate this industry. The three industries that they're in, they are the market leaders in those industries. Whereas these companies like Dow and BASF, they have hundreds of product lines. Stepan has 3. So, but they are the market leaders in those. So I guess economies of scale does matter, but they are the leaders.
Well, this is my question, right? Because if barriers to entry are high, and that's the main barrier, then this is a pretty defensible position. And even though Dow can throw big piles of money at this, they have to unseat Stepan, or they won't be competitive in this market, cost-wise. Last question: is cost pretty important in the surfactant industry?
Yeah.
I would assume so, because it's not really differentiated. Okay, cool. Thank you.
I have a question on the chart where you had the geography of the United States. You mentioned the purple states, but you did not mention California, which is in red.
Yeah, I think this is a chart geared towards California, and it's kind of comparing California's energy policies to other states in the U.S.
Okay, so it's just, I think maybe you should mention that, because it stands out because it's in red, and you mentioned the purple.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Oh.
Ask him something.
Okay, I'll keep talking if nobody else wants to. So, let's see if I keep recording this. All right. Anyway, so if everything you've told me is true, okay, so there's substantial economies of scale in surfactants, and nobody else is close to as big as these guys are in surfactants, then what are we worried about, right? You know, so Procter & Gamble is making a small amount, you know, they can vertically integrate, sure, but their costs are going to be so much higher, right? So would you say that the real risk is, because I kind of heard a couple of different things, the real risk is that they're going to lose their position in surfactants, or that people are going to need less surfactants?
That's the issue right there.
Okay.
That you just mentioned. So companies like Procter & Gamble, they're making their profits by using less and less and less of these things. So what I'm saying is that laundry detergents made today are less effective than they were made 20 years ago, because Procter & Gamble has taken less and less and less and less, and that's how they reduce their costs. So
that's why they've started creating their own, because they don't see a need in purchasing them. So they're
Because they don't need many.
Right.
So the cost thing doesn't matter so much. So, okay, so that's why you're recommending this thing. Now, what does this industry look like? The 5 forces chart that you showed applies to this industry just the same?
yeah, well, the interesting thing about the polymers industry, which is the insulation and the heating and cooling, Stepan is the market leader in that as well, and that is a differentiated product. So I don't pretend to know chemistry or anything like that, but I know that product, people choose Stepan. They are the name brand in this chemical or whatever, so that's what they expect to see their growth in the next few
Well, and that's how you solve your margin problem, right? So if you've got a situation where your margins are at risk, if you sell a product that you can command a price premium on, and that gradually becomes a greater part of your business, then that's going to increase your margins.
Right, and that's exactly what they're doing.
So why do you have a hold on the stock? If you think their margins are going to go up,
Because surfactants right now are 70% of their business as opposed to 26% for the polymers. It's just this 70% of their business model is essentially stagnant. So we have not seen enough confidence in the polymers industry so far to recommend that somebody go out and buy this stock right away, especially since the stock has tanked 33% so far this year.
And right now, like the energy efficiency, like that trend is just now starting in the U.S. and like in Germany and places like that. And until we can see more of that happening, more polymers being purchased from Stepan, we didn't want to recommend a sell or a buy, just because we're not really sure what the future really holds for it.
I will say this, though. Of all the companies that Heidelberg has analyzed over the years, this is like a black box for the most part. Trying to get into the chemistry that you were talking about, that alone has been a challenge, but it's kind of like a black box. There isn't all that much information about this company. Last year we did Kellogg's. Well, information everywhere. Just go to the store, you can see exactly what their product is. These products are kind of like part of something else, part of the raw materials, and that's been a real challenge. I think you would agree with that. Keep asking questions.
I don't want to dominate the conversation.
No.
I do have more questions.
I promised them I would not ask them questions today.
Do they? So are the companies like Dow, given that Stepan is relatively small in the polymer business, is it going? We've talked about the fact that the surfactant business is a pretty defensible position for Stepan. Even the bigger companies are going to find it hard to jump in there too much. Is the same true of the polymer business?
They are the leader in polymers right now. However, they aren't, like they said, it's only 26% of the company right now. So they're trying to grow since they see surfactants decreasing, but
Can I do some 490 talk? Do they have the resources necessary to grow that business?
yeah.
They're beginning to. That's why they acquired the facilities, just because they didn't have enough room to make it. They had so many surfactant plants, and now that surfactants are starting to go out for the company, they actually had to purchase more facilities to either make it or even just areas where they could get the raw materials faster to the company. So they're beginning to. They're taking the steps, but they don't have them all quite yet.
And like I said, this polymer business is really geared towards places that are quickly urbanizing, such as China. And so they just acquired a polymer facility in China. However, there was some sort of river something environmental issue, and the Chinese government actually seized the entire factory, shut the thing down. And, yeah, you gotta love that. And so it's not being used right now. They're trying to get that not tied up anymore, and that's another reason behind our hold position right now. So because the biggest target market for this industry is not being active. So
I have another question about surfactants, and again, my knowledge of chemistry is very limited. But I believe that the issue with surfactants had something to do with environmentalism. And maybe that's what the China thing is about too. Things getting into the groundwater, things getting into the rivers. Because when let's say you wash your clothes with phosphates, I know phosphates is a form of surfactant. I'm just wondering if that's what isn't driving the reduction in surfactants use by companies like Procter & Gamble and others. So maybe that could be something to address.
Yeah, as we're all moving from powdered laundry detergent to liquid, the amount of surfactants needed is also becoming less and less. So companies have actually stopped buying as much because they don't need it to produce their product. And that's probably definitely, read some articles about that too. But there's emerging markets such as Brazil and Singapore that Steppen wanted to try to, go into to try to sell more surfactants because they're kind of not using what we're using currently. They're still kind of a little bit behind the times.
And maybe their hygiene is different or something. I'm just thinking there's an environmental piece that probably has an impact. I'm not sure what it is. Have you spoken to our science people? Might be worth it for you to talk to our science professors before you go up there Saturday, just a suggestion.